Wow, what a group. Last time I addressed a group in Ohio, it was in Cincinnati when I renamed it Cincinnati, West Virginia, over in Mid-Atlantic. They didn't take too kindly to that. But I did learn that anytime you address a group in Ohio, you always start out by saying, OH! Marshall. Y'all gonna get me in trouble before I even start. Madam President, I want to thank you. Thank you for having me and for the OEA, because it's truly an honor and a privilege to represent the teachers and service professionals who I call the educators in West Virginia. But the educators are the ones that are the heroes in all this. The educators are the one who made the tough decision to step out and stand up for themselves. And so they deserve all the accolades and all the applause that anyone can give them. So if you don't mind, I would ask for one round of applause for the educators of West Virginia. Thank you. Thank you. Now, more importantly, I never address a group of educators that I don't thank you. Thank you for what you do every day, because we have the greatest profession of all. We're in the profession that we make a difference in kids' lives. We're the only profession I know that can take even the broken and help them make something of themselves. Thank you so much for everything you do every day. Thank you for what you do for your students. And it takes all of us, the bus drivers, the cooks, the secretaries, the teachers, the counselors, the principals. It takes everyone to be successful for a child, and that's what we do. Now, I don't know if you know it or not. I saw the video, so obviously you do, but we had a little activity in West Virginia this past year. From about February 22nd to March the 6th. And during those 9 days, the eyes of the world were on West Virginia. But you know, we have this crazy idea in West Virginia. We believe that every child deserves a great public education, not just a few. And we also believe, crazy idea, that the educators are the true experts of public education. Not the politicians. Now I'm going to ask you a question. This is the interactivity portion of the speech. I want you to close your eyes a minute. I want you to think of the person outside of your parents or your family who had the greatest influence on your life. You can open your eyes now. I'm going to guess that most everyone in here thought of a teacher. I'm also going to guess that no more than one of you thought of a politician. Just a guess. Just a guess. And it is because we make the difference. You know, when you're looking at education issues, why don't they come to us? Why don't they ask us what changes need to be made in education? That would be the smart thing to do, wouldn't it? But politicians decide what goes on in our profession. Folks, we've got to change that. We have to change the way that people look at education. And that's what we started in West Virginia. You see, our activity was really four-pronged. We had what we called a four-legged stool. Most people know that we were 48th in the nation in pay, and it was about salary. But it was also about our health insurance, and we have a statewide health insurance plan. And the burden of the increased costs kept falling upon the educators, the participants of the plan. And then we had an education committee that thought that they wanted to destroy public education. We don't have charter schools in West Virginia, so they wanted to introduce charter schools. They wanted to introduce education savings accounts, and then they wanted to take seniority away from RIF and transfer process. And finally, they decided they wanted to destroy the union. They actually passed the year before a bill that would make it more difficult to have your payroll deduction for the dues, and the governor vetoed it. So they started that same bill again. So those really were the 4 issues that we were going to talk about during this activity. And I don't call it a strike, I call it a work action. And the work action was because, unlike a strike, very few people lost any money in West Virginia. Very few people lost anything from their paycheck. Now, we're going to go until the end of June now, but we are making it up. But we didn't decide February 21st, we should do something tomorrow. It took a lot of planning. We actually started planning long before that and organizing long before that. In November and December, we started asking our locals to go to have meetings with their legislators to talk about the issues that we knew were going to come up during this legislative session. And then we had a rally for public education on Martin Luther King Day. That's a day that we all had off in West Virginia. But we weren't done then. We had informational picketing. We would go to the courthouses and libraries and selective areas in the communities and have informational picketing about how we were 48th in the nation in pay, how there were 727 positions in West Virginia that didn't have a certified teacher in them. And all of that is doing harm to kids. And that's how we phrased everything. It's all about the harm it was doing to our students. Well, folks, those are just not in just math and science. We have first grade positions that have had 10 substitutes in them in a year. You're doing harm. You're doing harm to kids when you do that. And it's because people don't want to come into education anymore. First of all, the salary is low, but the respect level is even lower. It's time for us to change that. Now, after we did the rally and the informational picketing, we did probably the smartest thing that we did during the whole time. We went to our county boards of education, and we asked them for a letter of support for teachers and service professionals and their struggles that we were having. And almost every county board of education gave us a letter of support. That was huge when we went into the work actions in February, because it's difficult for a superintendent to say, no, I'm not going to support you, when their board says, oh yeah, you will. And that's why we didn't have a stoppage. I mean, we didn't have the loss of wages. Every superintendent, every night, would call school off. And you would see the map just start to get more and more red with people calling school off until all 55 counties were done. Of course, we're like everywhere else. We did the Wear Red for Ed in education, but we did a couple other things that were unique. We actually had parents that did informational picketing for us. We went to the communities and we talked to our parents about what was happening and how it was affecting their kids. And they did informational picketing. And then they joined us outside our schools and did walk-ins. 30 minutes before school started, we all gathered together. We talked about how this was affecting our students in West Virginia. And as a show of solidarity and a show of strength, we all walked hand in hand into the classroom. That is huge, folks. That's a huge statement. So then we had 4 counties, 4 southern counties, and I happened to have grown up in one of those, Wyoming County, that decided we're going to take a stand now, and we're going to have a walkout now, one-day walkout. It happened to be a snowy day that day. That community had so much support, and they'd done all these things and had the parent support, that our state road crew met them at the school that they were getting ready to leave from, and they plowed the roads to Charleston ahead of them. when the Senate thought that they could wait us out and really have the public change, they didn't see the strength in that. But when a state road crew will do that for you, you know that you have the support of the community. Well, then we had our counties go together and with both organizations, and we have both WVEA and AFT in the state, and we had to work on this together. You know, we fight for a long time, but when everybody's fighting you, you join forces. And we decided that we would have our locals come together and give us an authorization vote to call a work action. We didn't tell them when it was going to be. We didn't know when it was going to be at that point. But we had to have the authorization. We had to have the knowledge that if we went, it wouldn't be just a few counties. It would be everybody. And that happened on February the 11th. They voted, and it was overwhelmingly from all the counties to give us that support. So then we were waiting. We had a rally on a Saturday, and at that rally on Saturday, we said, we're going to be walking on Thursday, and all 55 counties will walk out on Thursday and Friday. But our educators did exactly what they do every time. They wanted to make sure the kids were taken care of. And our educators, as soon as we made the announcement that we were going to be out on Thursday and Friday, they started working with their communities and their churches to make sure that the kids had hot meals. They wanted to make sure that the kids had the food over the time that we were out, so they worked with the food pantries. And they were worried about child care with many of our parents, and we're such a high poverty state that we'd set up child care for those that couldn't do it, that couldn't afford child care. People were amazed at that, but I wasn't, because that's what we do. We're educators. We take care of our kids. That's why we've allowed politicians to dictate where we're going for so long. It's because we're so tied up and so concerned about our kids that we really haven't paid attention to what the politicians are doing. Well, folks, that's changing. That's changing quickly. And more importantly, we want to make sure that we don't forget that. There are so many of us that said the eyes of the nation are on West Virginia, and for 9 days they were, and we've become a catalyst for other states. But the eyes of the nation are still on us, because we had a primary election on Tuesday, and the eyes of the nation were looking at us on Tuesday. Would the teachers forget? Would the educators forget? Would they be complacent? Well, one of the most outspoken senators during this time was a senator named Carnes. And he even said after the work action, that's just a little bump in the road. You know, that happened in March. They'll forget about that in May. And most of those people vote on the Democratic side anyway. I'm not worried. Well, I'm proud to say that Tuesday night, Senator Carnes was defeated 63%. 63% to 37%. He lost every county. It was one of the largest geographical districts in the state, and he lost every county, even his own. And actually, in 2010, he voted in Florida, and his company is still based in Florida, and there was some question on whether he could run in 2014 when he was first elected. But his opponent didn't use that. His opponent ran a positive campaign. Even though Carnes was very negative against him, his opponent said, I'm only going to be positive. Well, yesterday the newspaper called and said, what do you think about the Carnes race? And Carnes said that many of the teachers switched their registration from Democrat to Republican just to vote him out. And I happen to be a little bit of a smart aleck, I can't help myself. I said, well, it's too bad that his constituents in Florida didn't get to vote for him this time. There are some other things that I'm very proud of. I come from a long line of teachers. My dad was a teacher. I taught for 22 years before I became president, and now my oldest daughter is a middle school teacher. In 1979, my dad walked out for public education in West Virginia. In 1990, I was a third-year teacher, and we had the first teacher strike in West Virginia, and I was on the picket line. And now in 2018, my daughter was on the picket line. 3 generations have had to walk out. Now, while I'm filled with pride at that, it's also sad to know that for 3 generations, we've had to fight this same fight, and for really longer than that. But you see, West Virginia did something amazing. We decided, with a little prodding for our governor, and it really came from a 6th grade student, that he looked at education wrong, that it was time to make an investment in education, just like you invest in tourism and trying to get business there and everything else. Because he went to a town hall meeting, we had actually passed a 2% pay raise, and the governor signed it, which equaled out to $800. And he kept saying, you got to go in, this is illegal. Our attorney general said this is illegal. We're going to file an injunction. But the amazing thing was he couldn't find anybody to file an injunction with him, because all the state boards said, no, we're supporting it. All the county boards said, no, we're supporting it. All the superintendents said, no, no, no. Our board's behind him. So he couldn't find anybody to file the injunction, which was an amazing thing. But the governor decided to do a town hall meeting, 3 town hall meetings on Monday before the strike ended. And he thought he would be really good in these situations because that's his strength. And at one of the ones, he was telling the 6th grade student asked why they were putting so much money in tourism and commerce. And the governor was explaining to him that for every dollar you spend in tourism, you get $8 back. So the governor, using his logic, hands the little boy a dollar bill and says, now, if you give me that dollar bill, I'll give you 8 back. Now, doesn't it make sense to invest in tourism? And the little 6th grade student looked at him and says, yes, but if you take that same money and invest in me and students like me and invest in education, you'll get much more than $8 back. Next morning, the governor called us into his office and said, I've looked at this wrong. What do you want? And they had proposed 5% over 5 years, 1% each year, and then it went to 2%. And then so many numbers, it just went crazy. And we said, we'll take 5% up front and an investment every year from there. Don't put a number on it yet, because if our economy grows, we want more than 1% or 2%, but we want an investment. And the governor says, all right. But that's not all. We have a task force now that's looking at our health insurance. And the task force just started meetings, and we're going to make changes in our health insurance so that the money doesn't come out of the backs of the employees, that we have to find a funding source for that, and we're going to do that before November when the new plan rolls out. And it's still not all. All those anti-public education bills were buried. They're gone. And the 4th leg of the stool, the anti-union bills, are buried so deep that they may never see the light of day again. Especially when their lead sponsor just got beat 63% to 37%. The eyes of the nation are going to continue to be on us because it's November, we got to make some other changes. There's some people we have to defeat in November, and we will do that. But then in January, the people that we vote in, we have to make them stand up for what they said. And we have to make them believe that this investment is a continued investment, not a one-time investment. If you think about investing for your retirement, you don't put a one-time money in and say, oh, that's enough. I'll leave it there till I'm 65. No, you invest every year. So our educators have decided that we're going to hold their feet to the fire. And they have 2 years. Our House people and our Senate has 4 years. And if you don't do what you say, we'll vote you out and get somebody else in there. That's when you have real power. That's when you know that public education becomes a priority. And that's when you know that educators are really taking a stand. So it will happen. I believe it will happen. I was nervous Tuesday night. I clicked refresh about every 30 seconds. And when I saw those numbers come in, that's the second happiest time I've had this year so far. The happiest time is when the governor decided that to make the investment. There were bumps in the road. The Senate decided, no, we're going to make it 4% instead of 5%. Now, our senators are not the smartest people in the world. So they did this on a Saturday night, thinking that teachers weren't going to be there. Of course we were. You know, you can't outweight teachers. And they thought, well, if we just delay this a little while, they'll sit there and they'll have to go. Well, they don't understand that our bladders are so huge. We don't have to go to the bathroom for a long, long time. We can wait you out. So they thought they passed the 4% bill, but they passed the wrong bill. They actually passed the 5% bill. And when they realized what they did, they actually sent it over to the House. And the Speaker of the House, who was one of our strongest supporters during this time, but is just a truly honest gentleman, said, no, I can accept this and we'll do 5%, but I won't do that. I'm going to let them know their error. And he sent it back to them. And so the Senate had to decide, how do we back this up? Because under the rules, they amended it on second reading, but they couldn't go back to second reading because you can only go back to the previous one, which was third reading. So they broke their own rules to do it, and there's all kinds of, the parliamentarians going crazy and everything's going crazy. And it's late Saturday night. I really wanted to yell out, live from Charleston, it's Saturday night. But then the tears in people's eyes, in our educators' eyes, when they fixed it to the 4%, was heartbreaking. Because everyone wanted to be back in their classroom with the kids. Then the next day, on Tuesday morning, 2 days later on Tuesday morning, let me back up. On Monday, so we asked our teachers and educators, we're not doing pickets in the counties now. Everybody come to the Charleston. Everybody come to the Capitol. They took me serious. I didn't think they'd be all coming, but they did. We closed the Capitol down at 11 o'clock with the number of people in it. And we had over 7,000 people outside the Capitol. 6,000 in, 7,000 out. And then what I really believe was the turning point happened, because the Senate still was sticking to the 4%, is the educators outside formed a chain completely around the Capitol. And one of our senators led us in prayer. Folks, prayer works, because the next morning, the Senate says, we'll give you the 5%. By 3:30 that afternoon, the governor signed the bill, and he gave the first copy of the bill to the Speaker of the House, who deserved it. But he gave the second copy and the third copy to me and our Executive Director, David Haney. Wasn't expecting a little emotion here. But I gave my copy in a frame to my daughter, and it hangs in her room. And she proudly says, "I stood up for public education." Yeah, we've been asked to talk to a lot of people in a lot of states. I've been in Oklahoma, Indiana, I've been on the phone to several other states. But in Arizona, I've talked a lot to Joe Thomas, the president in Arizona. And when they were first talking about doing something in Arizona, the press asked him, said, "President Thomas, did the West Virginia teachers give you hope?" And he said it best, and I have to give him the quote. He said, "No, they didn't give us hope. They made us believe. And belief is so much stronger than hope." Well, folks, I, like you, believe that our students are much more than a test score. Like you, I believe that our students are our future, and we have to do everything we can to provide them the resources and the best people in front of them, the best teachers, the best educators that we can get, and put them in front of those kids, because they will be the future. And like you, I believe in public education. I like to believe that we've changed the world, but this is just the beginning. When we all stand together and say enough is enough, then we truly know that we have changed the world. Folks, I believe in you. I believe in what you do, and I thank you for what you do every day. And thank you for having me. Thank you, Madam President.